What if Italy was competent in World War II? In our own timeline, Italy would join the Second World War in 1940. Right off the bat, Italy would humiliate itself when a small French garrison was able to bleed the much larger invading Italian army. There was a small glimpse of competence when they conquered British Somaliland, but that was shattered when they failed in Greece and Egypt. In both Germany had to help them, and even then, they were pushed out of North Africa in 1943. That same year the Allies landed in Sicily, leading to high-ranking officials ousting Benito Mussolini, leading Germany to invade and establish the Italian Social Republic under Benito Mussolini, sparking a 2-year-long Italian civil war. In the end, Italy became a democracy again, but in form of a republic, and it lost its colonies to the United Kingdom and France, the Decans to Greece and Istria and Sara to Yugoslavia. But what if that didn't happen? What if Italy was competent in World War II? In this timeline, for some reason the Italian army and chief of staff just randomly becomes overpowered. Maybe the spirit of the old Romans possesses the army and generals. In 1940 the Italian army blasts through the Franco-Italian border and annihilate the French garrison. Just 15 days later France surrendered, meaning their gains are rather meager. Nonetheless, they still got the lands east of the Rhone, Corsica, Tunisia and Djibouti. Italy would then take British Somaliland and invade Egypt. The British weren't able to stop the Italians, and the Italian offensive halted at the Nile River with Alexandria being besieged. Operation Compass ends in defeat. Italy would also blast through Greece and conquer the nation with ease. In early 1941, Italy and Germany would push the British all the way to the Suez Canal. With the British unable to supply their forces in the Mediterranean Sea, Malta and Cyprus would fall. Together with Iraq, the Axis also conquered Kuwait, Transjordan and Palestine. In the spring of 1941 the Axis would invade the Soviet Union and make rapid gains. Due to a slightly earlier invasion, Moscow would fall in 1941. The Axis then settled for winter. During the war Iran would also become a front, but with the Axis only holding Khuzestan. In 1942 the Axis launched Case Blue and are still stuck in Stalingrad, but in this timeline the Italians hold the flanks and Operation Uranus would fail. Soon later Stalingrad falls. The Axis push all the way to the Caucasus Mountains. Fearing an Italian invasion and seeing where the wind is blowing, Turkey would then join the Axis and invade Georgia and Armenia. In 1943 the Axis pushed the Soviets back even further to the Volga River. The Red Army would coup Stalin and be forced to sign an armistice. In the Treaty of Moscow the Soviets lose everything west of the Archangelsk-Astrakhan line. Finland annexes Karelia and Kola, Romania annexes Bessarabia and Transnistria, Turkey annexes Batumi, Meshkedi and Nakhchivan, and Iran annexes land south of the Aras River. The rest would go to Germany. By this point the Italians have conquered Sudan and connected their two fronts. Spain also joined the war. In 1944 the Allies finally agree to a peace. The United Kingdom would stop supporting any exiled government, with French Equatorial Africa going back to Free France. France would be further humiliated by having to give Morocco to Spain, Cameroon and Togo to Germany and Syria to Turkey, with Reichskommissariat Belgium getting the closed zone, Italy taking its Mediterranean coast and Spain taking Ruslan and also Gibraltar. Italy would establish a puppet regime in Egypt and a colony in Palestine and Transjordan. Iraq keeps Kuwait. Japan would also keep its gains in Southeast Asia, and the West stopped supporting China, which soon thereafter falls to Japan. After the war, a Cold War between the Japanese-led Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, American-led Organization of Free Nations, German-led Unity Pact, Soviet-led Comintern and Italian-led Rome Pact emerges. All of these major powers and United Kingdom would build nuclear weapons. In the United States, due to the defeat in the Second World War, Republican Thomas E. Dewey defeats incumbent Franklin D. Roosevelt. He would then go on to defeat Democratic Harry S. Truman, states' rights Strom Thurmond, and progressive Henry O. Wallace in 1948. In 1947 and 1948 Vittorio Emanuele III and Benito Mussolini would die. Umberto II would become king and Galeazzo Ciano would become prime minister. Italy under Ciano would welcome Jews in Palestine and encourages them to go there to spite the Germans. This and the Chiano Doctrine would officially begin hostilities between Berlin and Rome. In 1949, the German-occupied northern France becomes the French state or North France under Pierre Laval, while the Italian-occupied south becomes the Kingdom of France or South France under Charles XI. In 1950, the French War begun with the north invading the south. At one point, the south only held Montpellier. A coalition of many countries, but especially Italy, would then push back the north only for a German invasion to stabilize the front where it begun. The war would coincide with the collapse of the German economy. With the war machine no longer conquering new land, the system collapsed in on itself. Furthermore, in 1953, Hitler would die and the whole German sphere collapses. Germany is in anarchy as different high-ranking Nazis fight for power. This leads to North France being all alone and falling to the south. Hungary and Romania would now seek protection from Rome, now that Germania is preoccupied. During this time of troubles, the Soviet Union would invade the German Reichskommissariats in the east, while the Italians took control over Slovakia, northern France, and Algeria. French Africa, Belgium and the Netherlands and Norway were liberated by the West, and Denmark, Sweden and Finland also seek protection from the West. Denmark would however fail to get back the Faroe Islands and Greenland, as the former voted to remain independent, and the United States didn't want to give up the latter. Germany would become a hermit kingdom, isolated from the rest of the world, but with a huge nuclear stockpile. So basically North Korea. The Soviets would eye Iran, Turkey and Romania as they have some formerly Soviet lands, but also Finland, which just puts them closer to their guarantor. In 1952, Democrat Dwight D. Eisenhower would defeat Robert A. Taft and then go on to crush John W. Bricker in 1956, due to his victories in Africa and Western Europe. In 1958, the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere falls apart as a massive anti-Japanese revolution breaks out in China, which would be later known as the Greater East Asian War. In Vietnam, the communists and nationalists would gain ground and begin to push the Japanese out. Thailand would officially leave Japan, and being cut of Burma falls to anarchy. The Malayan Communist Party would take over Malaya, and Sukarno declares the independence of Indonesia. The Philippines also drift away, with pro-American forces capturing the south and pro-Soviet ones the north. In the end, all Japan is left with is its mainland, Korea and Taiwan. Hirohito and liberals would force the resignation of the fascist and militarist government, and a new constitution is passed that restores democracy, but gives the emperor a lot of power. Thailand, South Vietnam and South Philippines would ally with the US, while Malaya, North Vietnam and North Philippines would ally with the Soviets. China, Burma, Laos, Cambodia and Indonesia are largely neutral. The United States and Soviet Union would become the two main powers, with Germany, Japan, but also Italy losing influence and relevance. In 1960, Republican Nelson Rockefeller would defeat Democrat John F. Kennedy. He passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and defeats Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964. Due to this, the Republican Party stays the party of the North, and the Democrats the party of the South. In 1968, Democrat Carl Vinson defeats Republican Clifford Case, and in 1972, Jacob Javits. In 1976, Republican Gerald Ford defeats Democrat Larry McDonald, but loses in 1980 to Democrat Ronald Reagan, who wins re-election in 1984 against Republican Harold Streisand. In 1988, his vice president Phil Gramm defeats Republican William Scranton, only to then lose in 1992 to Republican Dick Cheney, who defeats Democrat Richard Shelby in 1996. In 2000, Democrat Robert Bry defeats Jay Rockefeller, and in 2004, John Kerry. In 2008, Republican John McCain defeats Democrat Joe Manchin, and in 2012, Democrat John Tester. In 2016, Democrat Donald Trump defeats Republican Liz Cheney, only to lose in 2020 to Phil Scott. So overall, Democrats are still conservative and Republicans liberal. The Rome Pact would liberalize in the 80s and 90s. Yugoslavia and Romania were already democracies. In Portugal, the Estado Novo fell in 1974. In 1978, King Otto II couped Eastern Horthy and restored democracy. A new constitution is drafted that limits his power. In 1980, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi died and his son Reza Pahlavi would liberalize the nation. Bulgaria became one after the death of Democratization in 1981. Carlos I turned Spain into a democracy in 1982. Turkey became one in 1983, and in that same year Regent Abdullah died and Iraq liberalized under King Faisal II. Meaning only Italy is left. In 1984, Galeazzo Ciano dies and Giorgio Almirante becomes prime minister only to die 4 years later. Gianfranco Fini then becomes prime minister and he would hold democratic elections in 1990. The former Rome Pact members would ally with the United States, and Italy also liberates its colonies. France, Greece, the East African Empire, Egypt, and the Levantine Union gain independence, but Italy keeps Libya, as it is due to settlers mostly Italian. They also keep Albania for similar reasons. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union still collapses in 1991 and the United States becomes the sole great power. In this timeline, Italy would be the dominant power in the Mediterranean Sea, but so as a fascist power, but even after liberalizing, still dominates the Mediterranean economically in a EU-type system and still has one of the finest European armies. Germany meanwhile became an European North Korea. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.